Welcome back everyone to the final chapter of the Amalia Type Costume, my 1840s Greek court gown that I have been working on since September, and now it will finally be finished. If you're interested, I made a playlist with all the garments that makes up this ensemble, and I will link that down below. Today I will be making the zipouni or kontongouni, which is the little jacket, and the fez. I started by marking out the neckline of the dress I made in my previous video, then measuring and marking where the embroidery ends on it, so I can mark the edge of my eventual jacket to just overlap the embroidery of the dress underneath. Once I had the shape, I draped some scrap fabric over it, pinned it tight, and marking the lines I cut along them. Using these, I made a mock-up, which fitted beautifully, but after closer inspection of the exiting garments, I realized it has a way different and a very unique construction. It's made from 11 panels for one, instead of the 3 I was planning to use. It has 2 front, side and side back panels, a back panel, and 2 rectangular sleeves that are set in straight. I don't exactly understand the reason why it needs so many panels, but I can tell you that the sleeves are very easy to move in and quite comfortable. So I drew on some seams on my 3-piece mock-up, cut it up and made a secondary mock-up with sleeves. After I tried this over the dress to check if it fits, I ripped the seams up and transferred all the panels to paper. So as I was draping the zipouni mock-up, I realized I've done a lot of mistakes in my previous project, which was the gown. Because I think I should have made it as a body sloper instead of having the darts, and that makes so much more sense. And I don't know what to do. The gown is already completely done and finished. Maybe I could take it apart and take out the darts, but like the video is already out, so I contemplated the possibilities for a couple of days. Then on one bored evening, I just took my seam ripper and took the whole front of the dress apart. I redraped it on my dummy and resewed everything. And it just looks so much better now. It really bothered me before how creasy it was, and now it looks just so much better, I think. I also tried it on again without the corset and with the corset to see how much difference does it make. What do you think? Which was better? Before or now? Or with or without a corset? Which one looks more accurate to you? Alright, now let's get back to our regularly scheduled program of making the kontongouni. I scanned the paper pattern pieces in, and just like before, I used Photoshop to piece together the pattern pieces that were bigger than my A4 scanner. Then I used Illustrator to design the embroidery. Just as for the fustanella before, I again used the accident garments as inspiration from the collection of the Lyceum Club of Greek Women. I was a bit pressed for time in this project, so first I designed and embroidered the smaller side panels, and as the machine was clicking away, I went on making the front panels, then the back panel, and then the sleeves, that all had unique embroideries, all based on historical examples. If you've been watching my videos, you know by now that my embroidery machine can only do a maximum area of 20 by 28 centimeters, so I had to embroider the front panel in 2 goes. I used a dark blue stretch velvet for this coat that I embroidered using a self-adhesive stabilizer, but I would advise to use a non-stretch velvet, which I too wanted to use, but at the time I was frantically looking for a fabric for this project before they lock us down again. I just could not find any in the color I wanted. One of the biggest challenges of embroidering is the lining up of the different patterns so they will match up perfectly. The method I came up with is to line the previous embroidery roughly where it should be using the grid, then clip it in. Then I can see exactly where the second pattern has to line up on the grid, and I will adjust it to the position of it on the machine. Then I let it embroider for a couple of stitches, and if it's still wrong, I can readjust on the machine and just start the embroidery over. The back panel took 3 passes to embroider. The sleeves took 2 passes to embroider as well. I cut everything out, then I pinned the panels onto a self-adhesive washable stabilizer fabric. I did this because I wanted my stretch velvet to not be stretchy anymore. I roughly cut around them and very carefully on low heat and on top of another velvet to not crush the fuzz on my fabric, I ironed the pieces onto the stabilizer. Then I could cut the stabilizer to shape as well. Once Once that was done, I could start the only slightly complicated assembly. First, I joined the smaller side panels to the front panels, then the bigger side panels to the back panel. And at this point, I realized I made a huge mistake when I was embroidering the back panel. Somehow I misaligned the top and bottom designs, and they embroidered onto each other. This meant that at the bottom of the panel, there was a 2 cm gap of no embroidery. And now the pattern was very obviously shorter than it should be, and misaligned with the side panels. To fix this, I decided to take my smallest hoop and embroider something to the bottom panel. I sew the back and front panels together at the shoulder seams. And now comes the tricky part, setting the sleeves in. I started by hand sewing on 3 rows of this golden trim and finishing the sleeve ends. Then, matching the middles to the middle of the armhole, I pinned the sleeves to the bodice. At this point, you should sew the side seams up because the underarm seam will be joining to that for a bit, and then it will close up, creating the sleeve. It took a couple of tries to set the sleeves in correctly, but now I had most of the jacket ready. Next step was take the rest of the day hand sewing on 5 rows of golden trim, matching the accident garments. Lastly, I decided to line it, so I cut out all the panels again from the fabric I once bought online as silk shantung, but it's most definitely polyester, and repeated all the assembly steps previously mentioned. Before attaching the lining to the coat, I turned the edges of the velvet in and whip stitched them down to the stabilizer fabric. I wanted the lining to not show when it's worn, so I turned the edges of the lining in by a lot and tacked them to the turned back edges of the velvet. This way it will be the velvet peeking out if anything happens, and not the polyester. For closure, I used one big hook and eye. And with that, the kontongouni is done. Now, only a couple of accessories are left to do. First, I decided to make a second fluffy petticoat to layer over the corded petticoat for more volume. And the last thing I did was the fez. I made two mock-ups to see if it looks better constructed from one rectangle that's gathered at the top edge, or made from two half circles sewn together. At the end, I liked the two half circles method more. But to cut the seam length in half, I cut the half circles touching each other. Then I folded it in half, and inserting the tassel to the midpoint, I sew it shut. I made a tassel from a curtain tassel that I took apart and reconfigured to make it look more like the one in this picture. I had to sew in the rope by hand because it was too thick for my machine. Then I folded the edges of the fez back twice and felt it down carefully, so the stitches won't show from the outside. So you're sort of supposed to wear the fez at an angle on your head, but the tassel was so heavy that I was a little worried that it would slip off my head as I walk. So I sew in 3 bobby pins on the folded back edge on the opposite side of the seam. And with that, we are done with this whole ensemble. I'd like to thank you all for sticking with me through it all, and I really hope you enjoyed it.